There was a point in time when the name Bungie meant something. It meant innovation, it meant passion, it meant trust. This was the studio that created some of the most iconic experiences in gaming history. A studio that didn't just make games, it shaped culture. But somewhere along the way, that legacy began to crack. And now in 2025, Bungie is staring down what could be the final nail in its coffin. Serious plagiarism accusations that threaten to end their next big title, Marathon, before it even launches. So, how did we get here? How did Bungie fall so far from grace? To understand the collapse, we need to start from the beginning. Bungie was founded in 1991 by Alex Seropian, hope I'm saying that right, and later joined by Jason Jones, two guys in a Chicago basement with a shared passion for creating something different. Their early work was scrappy and experimental. Their early work might not be as notable, but they helped Bungie find its footing as an indie studio with big ideas. But it wasn't until 1994 that Bungie caught lightning in a bottle. Marathon, a sci fi first person shooter with a complex lore, atmospheric design, and a focus on storytelling. Released for the Mac at a time when PC gaming was king, Marathon gained a cult following. It wasn't just a Doom clone, it was smarter, more ambitious, and Bungie was planting the seeds for a new kind of narrative driven shooter. Fast forward to 2001, the gaming world changed forever. Bungie had been acquired by Microsoft in a bold move to help launch their new console, the Xbox, and Bungie delivered with Halo Combat Evolved. Halo wasn't just a hit, it was a revolution. Master Chief became an icon, LAN parties became a cultural movement, the multiplayer became legendary, and the storytelling for many, it was the first time an FPS had made them feel something deeper. Bungie wasn't just successful, they were at the top of the industry. Over the next few years, Halo 2 and Halo 3 built on that legacy. Bungie wasn't just making games, they were creating generational milestones. By 2007, Bungie had become a household name, but beneath the surface, things were changing. In 2007, Bungie negotiated its independence from Microsoft. To fans, this was seen as a victory. The creative geniuses were free again, but in hindsight, it may have marked the beginning of the end. After severing ties with Microsoft, Bungie was free. The shackles were now off. Fans waited eagerly to see what the legendary developers would do next, and in 2013, we got our answer, Destiny. Billed as a shared world shooter, Destiny was supposed to be the future, a living, breathing universe where players could explore, fight, and grow together. Bungie signed a 10-year publishing deal with Activision, and the hype train left the station full speed ahead. But the game that launched in 2014 wasn't the one Bungie had promised. Destiny was incomplete. Storylines were half-baked. Characters like the Speaker spoke in riddles and just vanished. And Peter Dinklage's infamous voice lines, let's just say that wizard came from the moon, lives on in meme infamy. Behind the scenes, reports later revealed that Bungie had gutted the original story a year before launch and rewritten it in a rush. The result, a game with beautiful mechanics and gunplay, but no soul at all. Fans were furious. The same studio that gave us Halo's deep lore and tight pacing had dropped a looter shooter that felt like a glorified beta, but Bungie wasn't done yet with Destiny. In 2015, The Taken King launched and changed everything. New content, improved narrative, a clear direction. Bungie had seemingly learned its lesson. The hype was now back and the fans returned. For a while, it felt like Bungie had found its footing again. But history has a bad habit of repeating itself. In 2017, Destiny 2 launched, and once again, the game felt stripped down. Features from the first game were missing, PvP felt neutered, microtransactions were more aggressive than ever. The company backlash was immediate again. And this time, it wasn't just about game content, it was about trust. Bungie had begun prioritizing monetization over gameplay. Players accused the studio of misleading XP systems, overpriced cosmetics, and designing content to funnel people towards spending real money. The Bungie that once felt like a scrappy team of artists now looked like a soulless corporation. In 2019, Bungie made headlines once again, splitting from Activision and reclaiming full publishing rights to Destiny. The community celebrated, hopeful that the company's soul would be restored, but what followed was pretty complicated. Destiny 2 shifted to a seasonal model, with content constantly rotating in and out. New expansions brought both innovation and confusion. While some updates like Forsaken were well received, others like Lightfall drew sharp criticism for poor writing and shallow execution. Content was vaulted, fan favorite weapons were sunset, and the game's lore, once rich and compelling, became fragmented across grinds, locked behind paywalls, and dropped in lore tabs nobody had time to read. Destiny at its core was still a great shooter, Bungie's gunplay was just unmatched, but the structure surrounding it felt like it was designed more for retention metrics than for joy. Slowly, the cracks in Bungie's reputation grew wider. And then, in 2022, Sony acquired Bungie for $3.6 billion. Once again, the fans hoped that this meant a new era of support and innovation, but instead, Bungie seemed to double down on what wasn't working: live service, dependency, inconsistent storytelling, and now missed deadlines. In 2023, Bungie shocked longtime fans by announcing the return of a classic, Marathon. But this wasn't a remaster of the 1994 cult hit. This was something entirely different. A reboot, reimagined as an extraction shooter. Think Escape from Tarkov or The Division Dark Zone, a far cry from the narrative-driven FPS Bungie had once pioneered. To many fans, the announcement felt hollow, nostalgic branding slapped onto a live service product with no campaign and no ties to the original story. Longtime Marathon fans were justifiably confused and even angry. Where was the lore? Where were the characters? Where was the soul of Marathon? Bungie insisted it was a spiritual successor, but behind the neon-coded trailer, something wasn't adding up. In late 2024, allegations began to surface. Artists and independent developers claimed that Bungie's Marathon reboot had lifted key visual elements, themes, and even directed character designs from lesser-known sci-fi works and community projects. One particular vocal accusation came from a small indie developer who had published a cyberpunk-themed extraction shooter prototype in 2021. Side-by-side comparisons revealed near-identical helmet designs, color palettes, and HUD layouts. The fans and critics began digging even deeper, and what they found was very troubling. Similarities weren't just surface level. It looked like Marathon had borrowed the entire design languages from world-building aesthetics to faction concepts, with minimal changes. The worst part, Bungie had not credited or acknowledged any of the original artists. The internet did what it does best, and it investigated. Artists found their work appearing in Bungie promo art, work they had posted to ArtStation or personal portfolios years prior. One even claimed that a former Bungie contractor had previously reached out for freelance collaboration, only to ghost them, and later see their designs appear in official Bungie concept art. As the evidence continued to pile up, Bungie's silence became deafening. Days passed, then weeks, and still no statement. Fans are now beginning to boycott Marathon for this reason alone. The trust Bungie had been clinging to was evaporating very fast. This wasn't just a bad game launch, it was a moral failure. Bungie had once stood for creativity and innovation, and now it's being accused of stealing from the very artists it once inspired. And the damage isn't just reputational. While the Marathon plagiarism scandal dominated headlines, it wasn't the only storm Bungie was facing. Inside the studio, things were already unraveling. In late 2023, Bungie laid off over 100 employees, many of them longtime veterans, artists, composers, and QA testers who had helped build the company's legacy. Among the casualties here was Michael Salvatori, the legendary composer behind Halo and Destiny's most iconic soundtracks. The emotional core of Bungie's games was now gone. The community was stunned. This wasn't just budget cutting, it felt like a purge of the studio's soul. Reports began surfacing from former employees. Bungie's internal culture had become rigid, corporate, and unrecognizable. Morale was at rock bottom. Development timeliness was in disarray. The final shape, the long-awaited conclusion to the Destiny saga, was delayed, and confidence in Marathon was tanking before a single hands-on preview had dropped. Bungie leadership, according to insider sources, blamed declining Destiny 2 player engagement for the layoffs, but that excuse didn't sit right with the fans. How could a company flush with Sony's $3.6 billion acquisition money, one of the most celebrated studios in history, be bleeding out its talent and faith so rapidly? The answer here is mismanagement. Over the past decade, Bungie had seemingly prioritized monetization models and stakeholder metrics over the very thing that made it great: bold and creative risk takers. From removing beloved content behind paywalls to implementing confusing seasonal grinds to pushing unfinished expansions and now facing serious accusations of creative theft, Bungie's brand has completely lost its meaning. Even the once loyal Destiny fanbase, a community that had weathered years of ups and downs, was starting to walk away. And perhaps most telling of all was the silence. As plagiarism accusations continued to gain traction in the media, Bungie offered no formal apology, no public response, and no damage control. And in that vacuum, the community began writing its own conclusion. Creators who had built their careers around Destiny began jumping ship. "I can't handle this. I can't keep defending this," they said. "Bungie isn't Bungie anymore." And that's the heartbreaking truth. The studio that had once created legends had become a cautionary tale of ambition without direction, legacy without leadership. It's easy to look at Bungie today and feel only disappointment. A once legendary studio brought to its knees by mismanagement, hubris, and a disconnect from the community that made it great. But to understand the heartbreak, you have to remember what Bungie was. This was the company that gave us Halo, that redefined what shooters could be. That made us believe that video games weren't just entertainment, they were art. It created memories, friendships, rivalries. It made us stay up all night grinding for loot. It made us care about fictional worlds and the people in them. But somewhere along the way, the mission changed. The studio that once built masterpieces for the love of the craft started building systems to retain users. That once created with curiosity and care began copying and extracting. The Bungie that inspired millions is not the Bungie that we see today. Because this story isn't just about one game studio, it's a mirror held up to the entire industry. An industry where live service models dominate, where artistic vision is sacrificed for quarterly earnings, where veteran developers are cast aside while billion-dollar acquisitions grab headlines, where the creative well is just drying up and desperation breeds imitation. Bungie's plagiarism accusations aren't an isolated incident. They're a symptom of a wider disease, the erosion of trust between gamers and game makers. Until that trust is rebuilt, until studios stop treating communities like wallets and start treating them like collaborators, this cycle will always continue. Bungie is a cautionary tale to the AAA gaming industry. Bungie was one of the greatest to ever do it, man. They were truly one of the greatest to ever do it. And now it's a name we remember with a mix of awe and regret. A legacy that once soared across the stars, now crashing back to earth. This was Bungie. All the recent events with Bungie really hurt because I was a massive fan of Bungie, and I'm just not anymore, man. And I don't think the outcome for this company moving forward is great. I think the developers there are very talented, and I hope everyone who has been laid off that has worked on games like Halo, everything like that, I hope they find a stable home at other developing studios, and I hope they continue to make great games. It is very unfortunate, and it is definitely a cautionary tale to the AAA gaming industry. Anyways, that's going to do it for the video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Let's have a discussion about Bungie and the plagiarism accusations. But anyways, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.